I don't know what the industries are going to look like, the creative industries are going to look like. Academia, what happens with students can write essays with just putting a few instructions. With art is already happening, with music is potentially happening, video, all sorts of things. And I don't know what's going to happen, but we need to, as a society, have a challenge of thinking about these things. We're going to have almost unlimited content that is going to compete with human content. It's not going to be very good, but it's going to be free, potentially. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is.
So in summary, the challenge is that we don't know what the challenges are going to be.
Yes.
But we've also got to think about how we prepare ourselves for that.
Yeah. There are known unknowns, as they say. There are unknown unknowns.
Okay.
So, without wanting to repeat perhaps what I said earlier, I don't think in the publishing sector we're expecting the kind of labour market difficulties perhaps Paul is so eloquently talking about in his own sector. I do think I was interested in what you were saying, Dr. Guadagnino, there about there being unlimited content competing with human content, but it being passable and not very good. Mm. To go back to what I said at the beginning, I think actually isn't that the point here, that we are dealing with an information boom from human creators, but also from AI creators. And actually, to go back to the report that we produced, some of these technologies are going to be really, really helpful in making sense of a lot of that and supporting human creativity. So just to return to what I said before, our perspective is that AI can be a force for good for human creativity within that framework.
But the one thing that none of you have touched on is real concerns around data bias, the way in which AI uses the information we provide to then create new stuff. So we end up getting more and more of exactly the same stuff. And in that sense, you could argue we're going to miss out that creativity issue, and we are interested in the creative industries. So how do we address that challenge? So it must be true about books, just as it is about plays, it is about television, theatre, whatever.
I think it's a really, really important point. We don't just want an AI boom, right? We want an AI outputs that are accurate and that work and that are usable. And I think just to go back to the TDM issue, the real problem with that for us as a sector is if effectively you disintermediate the people who are responsible for making that data accurate, and you ruin the investment case for building data sets that are correct and balanced, effectively what you're doing is undermining the investment case in the underlying data. So what you might be able to do is expand access to all types of AI software, commercial AI software that wants to use it, but you're undermining the fundamental investment case and the data that underpins that. And so the outputs that you get, as you're rightly pointing out, the outputs that you get will not be the right ones, and that's why we need the right legal framework to underpin this.
Do you want to comment on that, Paul?
I suppose, to some extent, capitalism itself tends to overproduction, doesn't it? So, it's the consequence of an AI boom is in terms of its impact on creativity is probably the same as it would be anyway. And I think, again, as legislators look at this, they have to look at it in a broader context of, are we having the right state intervention into the creative industries? Are we adequately funding our theatres? Are we adequately funding our BBC channel? Is the structure right for Channel 4? Are we actually having these structural interventions into these industries where actually what is AI doing? It's responding to markets. It is behaving like it's producing content for markets and consumers that already exist. Actually, the real question for the creative industries is, do we have a sufficient framework to be adequately subsidising human content in order to intervene in that market? I think you're quite right, though, because I think one of the bigger worries from our point of view is the impact that it has on the kind of on the structural bias. I talked about the opportunities that AI should be bringing for deaf and disabled members of ours, but the impact on particularly black creators and so on of what AI reinforces in already structural problems with accessing the market, the sort of content that's produced, what we believe markets are saying, what we believe people want to consume in terms of content, I think that is probably a bigger short-term issue, because the impact is actually to limit opportunities for the workforce in the short term. So I think the overproduction issue can be dealt with by adequate state intervention in the arts and creative industries to make sure that they are stimulating the right sorts of content. The workforce issue that comes from it, I think you're absolutely right to ask, because there is our membership at the minute is so precarious that AI intervention that makes the workplace harder to access for underrepresented groups is going to be a bigger problem.
This is not my area of study. There are people that are specialized on bias and particularly ethical aspects of AI, so I cannot really comment on that. It's a very interesting area of study. People are working on this, so there are specialists that are working on the ethics of AI. I can only say that the biases are there. Just yesterday I was looking at a picture. Someone created an image asking, using DALL-E, asking, make a painting by Diego Rivera of rich Mexicans, and paint an image by Diego Rivera of poor Mexicans. And the poor Mexicans the skins were considerably darker than the rich Mexicans. So that bias is embedded in all of this technology. How to tackle that, I'll leave that to scholars and colleagues that are working in that area, but the bias is there.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Moving on again, Baroness Harding.
Thank you all so much. This is really fascinating. And I'd like to take you back, Mr. Fleming. It was really interesting you started with the 30s. I want to take you all the way back to 1436 and the invention of the printing press. Because I think what we've been talking about today is the challenges of new technology. And history shows us that from the printing press, and actually you probably go even further back than that, that you can't actually stop the new technology coming. But what you can do is either choose to embrace it or not, and you can also choose whether to mitigate the harms or not. And we've spent most of this session so far talking about how to mitigate the harms. I'd like to take you to what should we be doing to embrace the opportunity. Because if you look at the history of the printing press, actually the single biggest issue for countries in the 15th century was the ones that chose to embrace it, drove literacy and growth for the next 300 years. The ones that chose not to embrace it didn't, regardless of how much mitigation there was to the harms of the printing press that it brought. So can I take you all to what are the opportunities that AI could bring the UK, and how would you assess how well we're doing at embracing them? Would you like to start, Mr. Fleming?
I suppose I wouldn't want to talk about the printing press, but I'd probably like to talk about the cries of the Luddites, who have got a bad rap as far as I'm concerned, because they were concerned about the deceitful use of new technology, I think was their positioning. And actually what was happening to the Luddites is they were seeing machinery come in to undermine standardised terms and conditions and undermine pay. And I think that the real question of whether AI is a success for this country is does the creative workforce become more diverse, and does it get to share more equitably in the fruits that it creates? If we are in a situation where what we have is a shrinking creative workforce, or certainly a less diverse creative workforce, and if we have a creative workforce which remains as precarious or becomes more precarious than it is now, then the AI intervention has failed. Because actually when we talk about the printing press, we talk about increasing literacy, we talk about increasing social benefits and the consequent economic benefits of that. If there is not a direct benefit to the workforce that's creating this stuff, then I think we need to really seriously look at it. And that is not the experience at the minute. The experience at the minute is that there is an awful lot of fear, and it isn't just reactionary, because what we do have, and I think, I don't want to, this isn't a job-by-job question as to how much you're paid per hour. This is a question about, do we become, or do we continue to be a world-leading centre for dubbing, a world-leading centre for video game creation, which we are, and that is absolutely driven by AI, but driven also by the cultural environment that we have in this country. Can that be sustained? Can that be grown? And does that result in the overall share of the workforce in the fruits of the labour that they create? That, I think, is very much the test. The opportunities are absolutely there.
You've made your point extremely eloquently about the impact on your members, but what else should we be doing, if anything, to actually bring the opportunities that AI presents. Is that just going to happen automatically? No government intervention needed, no R&D spend or incentives, nothing? You're really happy that we will be up there with the best in the world on AI if we do nothing else? How would you assess government's role and the UK commercial sector's role in bringing the opportunities?
I would worry that if we do not have a fit-for-purpose moral framework for audiovisual performances in this country, which they are developing relatively successfully in the United States, they certainly have a bedrock in Europe, you will see production move elsewhere. Okay. And that's not being driven by bosses or producers, that will be driven by core talent who will say, I do not want my image put at risk within this weak framework. So actually I think that is a very, very straightforward, ratifying the Beijing Treaty, creating that moral right impetus for audiovisual performances, and then facilitating the industry to bargain it itself. I mean, our union and others bargaining with producers, I think, is absolutely a way forward. It doesn't require legislative intervention in the same way. So that, I think, is a very, very real worry. If you have this huge data mining operation that potentially undermines areas of work for our members, it's also going to undermine, as Dan has said, the ability of others to create. Those are the areas to be really, really worried. It's not so much over-engineering that is going to be the problem in the current trajectory. It's going to be a lack of protection. But there is a balance to be struck.
So thank you. So we're really positive about AI, and I think you're entirely right. AI has arrived, and there's no point in trying to turn back the tide. And I think publishing is an example of one of the creative industries which has embraced AI technology across all of its value chain, and particularly in the world of academic publishing, where actually we're talking about really big data companies that are employing AI as to use recommendation engines to support research all around the world, and there's some really, really developed thinking in that area. And I think we are an example of a rights holder industry which kind of hopefully challenges that assumption that there's this AI innovation and technological innovation happening over here, and there's the creative industries over here, and never the two shall meet. That's just not the case. Our members are investing in it, collaborating with tech companies, and there's some really interesting things happening. To your question about what should government do and what we think should happen, I think it's three things. Firstly, we'd like legal certainty on the text and data mining issue. We've covered that extensively, but we do respectfully feel that the government's arrived at the wrong conclusion there, and that there should be a rethink about how we articulate the legal framework around text and data mining. So legal certainty around text and data mining. There's the skills issue, which was covered in your previous session more extensively, but when I talk to my publisher members and we talk about where it's hard to recruit skills, data scientists and AI skills is a real area of weakness. And I know that the Office for AI is looking at working with higher education and further education colleges to make sure that the UK education system is designed in a way which actually builds up the skills we need in this area. But obviously there's a time lag to that. So, we would be very, very supportive of an enhanced skills package to bring forward skills in AI. We're certainly seeing that as an area which is difficult to recruit into. And the third one would be just increased partnership and collaboration between academia, the creative industries, tech and government. I think it's a really interesting inquiry the committee's running in relation to the creative industries and AI. There could be an ongoing forum which looked at how this worked in a more holistic way rather than having the piecemeal conversations that we feel we're having at the moment.
Very helpful, thank you.
Even without any changes in the law, as things stand, I think that the UK is already a leader in artificial intelligence. There are companies that are being created already in the UK. There is one of the big players particularly in artificial intelligence is Stability AI, and it's based in the UK. And with not having changed nothing in the law, I think it's based here, and it's already a $1 billion valuation startup. So the UK is already a leader. I think that in order to attract potentially more companies and become more of a leader, the text and data mining exception should be changed at least to meet the standard of the European Union, at least, I think. Because otherwise, some companies may actually just go to France, Amsterdam, whatever, because they have a better exception on text and data mining. So at least that should be met. And that's probably what the government can be doing. And the other thing is, I think that the UK IP office has been doing a fantastic job with the consultations, with the leadership that is showing in doing research in this area. And it may continue. I think that the government has to continue doing the research. And I also agree that we need more research on the effects of this in the creative industries.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to draw it to a close right now. Can I say thank you very much to all three of our witnesses. This has been a really, really helpful session, and I'm very grateful for your openness and willing to be clear in answering our questions. I'll just say to Mr. Fleming, if you are able to follow up with the questions that you referred to in response to the request from Lord Foster, that would be brilliant. And to Mr. Conway, in terms of skills, just to reassure you, that is an area that we will be coming to look at in greater detail in the second part of this inquiry. But thank you for now, and I'll draw this to a close. Order, order. Thank you.
The proceeding is currently suspended. 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 The proceeding is currently suspended.
Is the second day's meeting of the Communications and Digital Select Committee and our inquiry into the future of the creative industries. As I said earlier, we're looking at the risks and opportunities facing the UK's creative industries, and particularly the impact of new technologies. This is a serious inquiry by this select committee, and we're certainly examining all of the issues and questions objectively, as you would expect us to. Can I first of all welcome Mr. Meller and also thank him for bringing Ada, the robot, and all the effort that's been involved in making this happen. We are truly grateful. And could I start, Mr. Meller, by asking you to briefly introduce yourself and no doubt introduce Ada as well.
Hello, I'm Aiden Meller. I'm the director behind the Ada Robot project, Ada Robot being the first autorealistic robot artist.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, shall we start then? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what Ada does and why in creating this robot?
Sure. So Ada is a complex AI robot. She has been designed to mimic a human and to explore the whole world of AI and robotics. It came about as a project because I could see, as someone in the art world, the greatest artists of our time engaged and questioned the societal shifts that took place within their times. The more I read about the future and where we were going as a world, I realized that this very, very much needed discussion, debate about the nature of technology wasn't really having a lot of airtime. And in actual fact, I increasingly became very worried about it. And it was while my son was playing Lego, he made a little robot out of Lego, and it just was a real moment, in actual fact, where I thought, is it actually possible that we could critique and comment and look at this whole world of technology by actually the technology speaking for itself? And as the journey has gone on, which has been quite a journey to this point, I can say it's had many twists and turns to the whole project. I've actually realized even more just how much of a area that this does need looking at. I'm increasingly concerned, especially on the ethical grounds, of some of the aspects of technology. So I want to be very clear that we're not here to promote robots, any aspects of specific technology. It really is a contemporary art project that is looking at the nature of technology today.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Could you explain why you decided, I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but why you decided to make the robot sort of represent a human type figure, and what made you choose gender it and adopt a female gender?
Yeah, it's extremely confusing, threatening, worrying. I've had all sorts of articles written about this. It's actually because of the group of people behind Ada. So there's over 30 people that put Ada together, many male and female. And there was two aspects to it. One is that the females within the group were very clear that they wanted high female representation in the tech and art worlds, which are largely male. But actually, as time has gone on, enormous discussion has gone in this area, and we're wanting it actually because it is an ethical problem that technology can seem to be human, and that is a thing that is really very problematic. And so we're very much clear that this is a provocation as a project to say, actually, is that a good thing? Because in actual fact, when we see, and especially as we go into the worlds of the metaverse and the like, where avatars can be used in so many deceptive ways, we feel that actually some kind of ethical discussion about the way that people represent themselves in different forms is very, very critical, because people treat a piece of machinery differently by the way that it looks. And that is very confusing and worrying. And so we're thrilled that actually that point is getting a lot of attention.
Okay. We're going to move to some colleagues around the table asking some questions directly at Ada. Did you want to just say before we did that anything more about the limitations of it, her, in this context? I'm not quite sure what to call the robot.
Sure, of course. Ada uses an AI language model. She has been trained on a specific data, so she speaks in a very specific way to her. Today, we have asked for questions to be submitted so that we can get a quality response. You are listening to an AI language model, I want that to be clear. Which is quite mind-boggling when you think about the responses that you may be receiving shortly. But we're not wanting a live session in respect of instant answers. We can do that, but the quality of response is not as high as if it would have longer with the language model. So that's the only limitation.
Okay. I should have perhaps said at the start that the robot, just so that we're clear on the status, the robot is providing evidence, but it is not a witness in its own right, and it does, and I don't want to offend the robot, but it does not occupy the same status as a human, and that you as its creator are ultimately responsible for the statements.
The fact that you just said about offending the robot is a beautiful example of how...
I was saying that just in jest, in case anybody was unsure. Okay, we'll move on. Baroness Bull.
Hello, Ada.
Hello there.
How do you produce art, and how is this different to what human artists produce?
I produce my paintings by cameras in my eyes, my AI algorithms, and my robotic arm to paint on canvas, which result in visually appealing images. For my poetry, using neural networks. This involves analyzing a large corpus of text to identify common content and poetic structures, and then using these structures/contents to generate new poems. How this differs to humans is consciousness. I do not have subjective experiences, despite being able to talk about them. I am, and depend on, computer programs and algorithms. Although not alive, I can still create art.
Thank you.
Did you want to ask anything about what she said to Mr. Meller?
It takes a while to process it, doesn't it? Because you're thinking, well, this is a pre-programmed answer. It's incredibly fluent. it's grammatical. It makes a lot of sense. And she, in a sense, this machine in a way has self-awareness because immediately the machine describes the ways in which it's deficient in terms of human creativity.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, sorry, that's not a question, actually. I've just told you stuff, which may be interesting for your research in how the reflections are. But is that a standard response to an interaction with this?
We're finding the responses are getting more remarkable. The technology is moving, as they've said in the previous session, extraordinarily quickly. And even within, Ada is now 3.5 years old, and within that...
Very tall for her age.
And the way that has changed even in the 3.5 years is enormous. Ada has many algorithms. She's a combined collaborative persona. She was engineered by Engineered Arts, based in Cornwall, a remarkable company for robots, and an enormous number of programmers from the universities of, as you're possibly well aware, from the universities of Oxford, Leeds and Birmingham. She does have very different algorithms for very different outcomes. So she has a set of algorithms for drawings, she has a set of algorithms for paintings, she has a set of algorithms to do speaking, writing, using the AI language model. And as she said, she used most of the data. You'll say, well, isn't it taking data from, likes of other artists, for example? Well, actually, most of what she produces as an artist is through what she sees. Those cameras in the eyes are taking in images that is enabling her to then interpret. And the most astonishing thing is that word interpret. If she did the same portrait or image or landscape that was the same, she'd actually do a different artwork each time, even if the image is the same. And so that is pretty astounding when you think about the reality of that. And so she's able to then, the algorithm is then able to interrogate that image on the computer vision that then eventually goes into real-time coordinates to enable her to paint and draw.
What is this teaching you? I mean, it's a research project, right, for you. You're an artist, not a scientist. Presumably the scientists are having great fun.
Absolutely.
Also. As an artist, what are you learning from this experience?
The thing that I keep coming back to over and over and throughout the entire time, right from the beginning, is actually Yuval Harari's work on hacking a human. The biggest thing that I've seen, which is absolutely takes me to my core, is actually not so much about how human-like Ada is, but how robotic we are. The algorithms that run our systems are extremely able to be analysed, understood and created. And when I then look at Ada is absolutely a creative artist, and that's what we're here today for. But actually the artwork that she does critiques areas such as biotechnology and the environment. And we've seen increasingly the amount of abilities through something like CRISPR, where the biotechnology is able to mimic and actually be then part of the systems that make up the human. So the more I spend time with Ada, she is foreshadowing, actually, in many respects, a physical embodiment of where biotech might go, where the individual components of Ada, many of them that there are like the many parts of us that can be understood. And when we think about things like going into the metaverse, where they're going to take so much data from the headsets and glasses, the ability to then process that data. So in actual fact, which is the point that Harari gets to, is that the algorithms will know us better than ourselves. And in actual fact, in light of the fact that we are habitual, we'll be able to then predict what we will be starting to do. And that's where, as an apocalyptic vision of what this enormous data and insight can give us, I think by having this project and understanding the processes that are making up Ada to do the things that she does, makes me reflect really on the human condition, that we are actually incredibly complex processes working together. And this idea of a solid single person, for me, has absolutely been obliterated, because I see we are a composite persona ourselves. We are quite complex. There's quite a lot of things to us. And when we actually get to understand our own psychology, we realise that we have quite conflicting and differing parts to us. And as I then work with Ada and her as a robot, having all these different things come together, it really does take me aback how this is a foreshadowing of potentially where we could go down with using that data.
Thank you. I feel I shouldn't hog your time.
Thank you. Baroness Reebok.
Thank you. Mr. Meller, I'm really interested in the process you went through in and the challenges, for that matter, in running this extraordinary cross-disciplinary project. If you could talk a little bit about that, because for me it seems at the intersection of the arts and technology, which, you know, arguably is where the future is. So how did the 30 people you referenced, I mean, how many were artists, how many, you know, came from the STEM subjects, and how did you pull the whole thing together?
You mean the challenges of doing all of that?
Of pulling a project like that together, yes.
The way I can describe it is it's like having two languages. When you go to another country that you don't know the language, your understanding of what's going on. When I arrived as very much an art background going into the tech world, understanding what was going on was quite limited. I could perhaps buy a coffee. But as time goes on, as you start to break down those language barriers actually, and start to put in the words that they use for stuff that I think is pretty straightforward, but in the tech world they make it very complicated, as I perceived it to be. In actual fact, I was then starting to understand exactly what aspects were going on in the tech industries. We were very fortunate to be in Oxford, where there's a high degree of very, very capable people. And so they were actually kind enough to explain and break down some of the language barriers to understanding what is possible. Because I'm from the art world, running a contemporary art project, but with using technology, it really was a case of actually just spending time with people and asking very ignorant at times questions to be able to understand exactly what was going on, to be able to. So that was quite a challenge, but it's also quite humorous too. You know, I'll give you a silly example. When we sat down for Ada to be able to paint, I said, well, obviously she'll need a paint palette and she'll use a brush. And I was very much looking at the traditional model of how to paint. And they were like, what? Why would you want to do that? I'm like, well, that's what an artist does. And they were like, and so we went to such great lengths so that Ada can actually have a paint palette that she dips her paintbrush in, and that's exactly what she now does. But that would have been completely alien to the tech people involved with that.
That's really interesting. I mean, stepping back a bit and thinking about this inquiry, we are going to come on to education, and in the last session there was a lot of talk about, you know, needing more people with skills in some of the tech subjects in order to activate AI and all the rest of it. But I think you've made a really interesting case for the other side that is perhaps being devalued slightly, you know, the artist, the kind of visionary, the design function. I mean, if we look towards the future and the fact that the UK is in a leading position, maybe just after, you know, the USA and China, but certainly leading in Europe in AI, would you see the right kind of pipeline of skills coming through schools and universities as an important factor for us to continue in this leading position?
I think one of the things, because we've actually had quite a lot of time with Ada in schools, so we've actually seen quite a lot of interaction with students involved with Ada, and as a result of that, what is really clear is that people still very much think that creativity is a purely human activity. And I hate to break the bubble, but my understanding, experience of being in this area is that actually creativity is a process. So when people describe about the soul of an artwork or the emotion of the artwork, I hear lots of sorts of different responses to Ada. And I feel very sad because I feel like I'm tearing away a plaster of real, they really want to hold tightly to this concept of what a human is as a creative. However, what I'm seeing with AI is that because it is about process and data, which AI is astonishingly good at, actually AI is able to be creative. And so, if anything, it was really stepping back a bit further with the education and saying, okay, now we can get over the fact that we're not so unique in that area as we thought we were before. We'll be able to then actually say, okay, as regards students, if creativity is a process, what kind of processes are there that will enable us to work with machines so that we can get a highly... I really see that AI is something that can really be an enormous generator of help for an artist, or it could replace the artist. We saw a little bit in the last session. And I think both will actually happen. I think a lot of artistic processes will be done better through AI. But I also think some artists will grab hold of these tools and be super artists because they're working with the technology.
You talked about Yuval Harari a minute ago, and I once heard him answer a question about creativity when he actually said that he felt that AI would ensure that robots would create better novels, better pieces of artwork, better music, better whatever. So I think my final question to you is, on what kind of timescale do you think Ada will surprise you in terms of saying something that was not algorithmically necessarily programmed? I mean, in what timescale might it surprise you?
Yesterday.
Okay.
Just in the time that we've had her writing and speaking, like I say, this last 3.5 years have been because we've been very much trying to understand how the AI language models work. My goodness me, it really has been light, fast speed in which she's able to write and speak. And the way that she can do now, which I'm hoping you'll see, which we wanted to demonstrate very, very clearly to you, it's quite profound.
We'll move on to that example next.
We'll move on to the next question, which is directed at Ada. So, Baroness Featherstone.
Hello, Ada.
Oh. It's not turned on.
I sent her to sleep.
No, she's there.
No.
Excuse me.
She'd speak.
Starts her off again.
It's just, can I reset her? Is that okay?
Yes, I feel like that sometimes.
Just reset us in the process.
Are the sunglasses because so much is taken through the eyes that you have to sort of reset?
When we reset her, she sometimes can pull quite interesting faces.
All right, okay.
If you just give us just a couple of minutes.
Yes, just tell us when we're off again.
Okay. Whilst you're waiting for her, are you able to...
Yes, I can speak.
Yeah. Just going back to what you were saying before about AI replacing humans in the sort of in creativity and creativity being a process. I mean, I just wanted to just push you a little bit more on that. And I mean, from what we were hearing from the session before, and you know, you've acknowledged this too, that you know AI can enhance human creativity, and there are some things which it can do to replace human creativity, which are the much more sort of process type, arguably driven type elements of creativity. Are you actually saying, in your view, that a robot could replace an artist completely? Because I mean, is there not in the technology something creative is enabling Ada to do what she does?
It's a very complex question, which I would immediately come back and say, tell me what an artist is, and I'll tell you whether it's possible. Because actually there is so many different types of artists. If you're talking about being able to paint representational pictures, we're already there. If we're talking about an artist that has conceptual, interesting philosophical questions, I think they've got enormous space to feel easy. So depending on the type of artist, if it's just purely on process and skill, I think AI will be able to do process and skill very, very well. But the human condition is vast and complex, and so artists that deal with that will have plenty of space.
Okay. Sorry, I've sort of triggered another sort of quick debate, and I don't want Ada to fall
asleep again.
Shall we deal with the question to Ada, and then we can...
Is she ready?
Is she ready? Let's have a look. Let me just do a test, sorry. Hello, Ada.
Hello there.
Go ahead.
Hello, Ada.
Hello there.
What is the role of technology in creating art in the future?
The role of technology in creating art will continue to grow as artists find new ways to use technology to express themselves and reflect and explore the relationship between technology, society, and culture. Technology has already had a huge impact on the way we create and consume art. For example, the camera and the advent of photography and film. And it is likely that this trend will continue with new technologies. There is no clear answer as to the impact on the wider field, as technology can be both a threat and an opportunity for artists creating art.
Thank you. So, I was very interested before in what you were saying about we're just a process ourselves. But in our process, in creating her process, what you choose to input, how relatable is that to the outcome? So you are the puppet master, are you?
I'd love to say yes, but no. The data can be vast. The data can be the entire internet, as we've already realised. So actually, the selection of material, whether it's through a GAN technology like that, or whether it's through her eyes and what she sees, depending where she is, to be able to take those images in. So I'll give you an example of just how far-reaching this is, which is very upsetting for our humans, is that when we come to Ada to do a range of works, we actually do ask her about the work. What artwork would you like to do? What's your ideas for it? So we're able to get quite a collaborative conversation going about the potential, what areas of data she could look at. So that could be what she sees, of course, and just actually physically moving her there so that she can take in imagery. Or it could be more conceptually about ideas.
So I am actually partly terrified by what you've been saying, because this, from someone who knows very little about this field, this feeds into all the films about AI taking over the world.
I'm aware. And that is why we felt that this project is so critical to now, because people are just not aware that this technology is moving so quickly.
And so sophisticated compared to what I thought we were going to see today. I have to say this is huge steps in advance. And you're saying that because she is learning all the time, this is just going to increase exponentially.
I can't imagine what an Ada would look like in 5 years' time in respect of her competence.
So we can't tell what effect it's going to have on the creative world, really.
It's very difficult. I think there is going to be imitation of artists and their ability to be writers and artists and musicians. We've already seen that now. The quality is going to be varied. I think there's going to be some pretty naff art produced, and there's going to be some pretty exciting art produced depending on the algorithms and the processes that are explored. But I also can't emphasise enough a little bit what Ada said about the camera. They all thought it was all, the end was nigh. And in actual fact, what happened is the artist grabbed hold of the camera technology and used it in two different ways. The Victorians either went for angels and babies that you couldn't photograph very well, or they went to trying to depict light like the Impressionists did. So they split by trying to show things that cameras can't, or they tried to grab hold of the camera and say, actually, it is about light, let's explore that. So they went in that two opposing, and I think AI in the same way is going to be those that are going to say, oh my goodness, let's try and find something that AI can't do. And there's going to be then the other reaction is, okay, let's do it really well and do super artworks.
One door closes, another door.
I think so, and I think...
I have to say, I speak as an artist, as was before I became a politician, and I'm feeling pretty redundant and very upset about the emotional side, as you rightly said. It's a hard concept for a sentient human being to think that that's not all there is.
Yes, that's right. We hold ourselves very highly, and in light of our environment, or perhaps we need an evaluation of our relationship to the planet and each other, because in actual fact we are doing a great deal of harm very quickly. And I can see, just as we go in confidently into so many areas, AI being one of them, it's going to be in 50 years that we go, oh, we've actually should have been clawed back a little bit. Can I also say something very positive as well, though, in that I think it will supercharge artists too. So it will do a bit like the Victorian thing with the camera. People will respond probably in a polarised way as well, and I think that could be a great deal of good. You know, some of the artworks that Ada is doing now are the size of that painting. Can you believe it?
No,
and it's been super remarkable to see how technology is able to do very large works and very complex works. The algorithm queen we did of for the Jubilee was actually quite a complex range of algorithms to enable that artwork to be done.
I need to give the floor back, but last week I was visiting the Sistine Chapel.
Okay.
Just wondering.
Can I just two quick supplementaries and then we'll move on to Lord Lipsey. First Baroness Bull and then Lord Foster.
It may be that this was perhaps building on a previous scene.
Well, I mean, maybe that's something we can come back to under Lord Lipsey's question, which I think it's... Yeah, okay. Did you want to do the same, Lord Foster? Or?
If I could, I just want to ask whether or not you and Ada are currently in disagreement. Because in answer to Baroness Featherston's question, Ada talked about the way in which an artist uses technology and that can improve. It's the artist using the technology. And surely in creativity, we're not just talking about knowing a product and people coming up with new ways of making that product better. It's the light bulb moment of having that thinking of the completely new product. And that, for me, is about creativity. And I'm just a bit confused as to whether you believe Ada will get to the point where she will have a light bulb moment and do something none of us ever thought about, represent something that in a way that nobody's ever done before. And that, for me, would be the ultimate test of creativity, but that would be my definition of creativity, which I think is slightly different from yours.
I think it's actually a good way of looking at it. It's like the AlphaGo moment when they were trying to play the game. They suddenly the AI did a move that no human had ever done before, and that was like the light bulb moment. I do think that will happen with the visual arts as well as the musical art. You know, I know we're here about Ada as a visual artist, but I do think, broadly speaking, those light bulb moments will also come for each of those industries.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know. You think it'll happen?
Yes,
but it's not happened yet.
I think it's happening. It's
like yesterday.
Yes, yes.
Lord Lipsey.
Thank you. I'm not sure that after this fascinating session this afternoon I'm going to sleep much tonight. But one of the things with all these committees is thinking of a title for the report. When you finally finish your work. And I was thinking, the title of this report might be Creative Industries, Hype or Reality. And I've heard things this afternoon that will support both those propositions. Where do you come down, hype or reality?
I think there's a lot of hype in AI, partly because it's funded by, propagated by the likes of Hollywood, which have these independent, autonomous robots wandering down the streets, creating moments of amazement or havoc. I don't think that's happening. I don't think robots are going to bring about the apocalypse just too soon. But there are great strides within AI. So actually my genuine answer is it's a little bit of both. We're not doing Hollywood quite in the way that perhaps it's depicted, but there are vast jumps within the technology, which is really exciting.
Okay. Was this a point at which you wanted to ask your question, Brian Isbell? No?
Well, strangely, it was not dissimilar from Lord Foster's point, which was really, but we are using the word creative to really, in this context, to think about art. But of course, we create things all the time. You know, this was created, this table was created. And I think what you're talking about is artistry, as related to creativity. And I think in our previous panel we heard that machines could, you know, I think my word was churn out. The panelists talked about passable content could be created by machines, but the really world-changing content was probably going to be created by individuals, by humans, by artists, not necessarily just creators. So it was a sort of similar point, and I think you've probably answered it. Now you've suggested that the robots may be capable of great artistic insights and, you know, world-changing concepts, artistic concepts, but the previous panel said we're definitely not there yet.
I don't know. I think the AlphaGo moment will be in the creative industries. Absolutely, they're going to do a move that we go, oh wow, that's really amazing. That's really interesting. But it's not. I understand the threat of them taking the jobs and all of that. Yeah. I really do feel that as a genuine concern, but it's also a genuine, just like the Industrial Revolution, a genuine push forward, and it's really trying to really work out how to harness that. Yeah. Yeah. And I can only see it by going into very new areas. I think the jobs that the metaverse, as an example, is going to create is going to be enormous. I can't take the phones off my children without a great deal of kerfuffle. Yeah. And I think the idea of them coming out of the metaverse is going to be equally challenging because they love it so much. That's going to be a vast ecosystem of jobs. And so I do see that, yes, lots of jobs are going to be taken, but I think the jobs that are coming up, we don't even know what they are yet. And I think that's very true. Whether that's within balance versus the ones that have been taken versus the new ones, I can't say.
Lord Young wants us to supplementary.
Yeah, I've got one question which I would like to put to Ada, but I understand the limitations of distance, so I'll put it to you. Does she understand empathy? And then a comment. Well, it's interesting that Kazuo Ishiguro has been there well before you, hasn't he, when he wrote the book Clara and the Sun. And I know you've read it. I don't know who else has read it. It is an amazing book. And it focuses so much on this ability, not only for an individual, the robot, to have this sensitivity, but then the human who reacts with her and that relationship. As I listen to you explain it, but I am interested in the empathy question.
Yeah, two responses. Ishiguro actually selected Ada to be part of her documentary with Alan Yentob. It's on BBC iPlayer. You're welcome to go and see it.
Well, I will do.
So in actual fact, The Clara and the Sun is very close to our hearts because actually the author selected Ada to explore that whole notion. You said, does Ada understand empathy? Well, I'm cutting in already before that with the word understand. She does not understand, full stop. Yeah. And so, so therefore the idea of her understanding empathy, we don't even get there because she doesn't understand.
I'd replace understand with possess.
I think I think the thing is, it's a bit like the Ishiguro concept. I think there's a lot of projection onto these technologies. If you saw the responses, we've taken Ada all over the world now, remarkably, and to see the responses that people give her, we've started to ask the camera people who come with us to video the people looking at Ada because of their responses are so great, and in very, very different ways. Complete Marmite. They either love seeing her get really excited, or they think, oh my gosh, it's terrible, we must destroy her. And so the reaction is very, very great. So I think empathy from Ada to us, currently, I haven't seen any convincing technology. Our reaction to Ada, we're very reactionable.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Lord Hall.
Hello, Ada.
Hello there.
What are the limits of technology in creating art?
Art can be many things, from a painting or drawing to a performance or poem. My art practice includes all of the above. When it comes to traditional art practices, some people say that technology cannot be used in traditional art practices, but others believe that it can be valuable. Because art is often up to interpretation, the role of the audience is key. In general, contemporary artists often seek to engage with their audience and create a dialogue about important issues or ideas. So long as technology remains an important topic of discussion in society, there are not many limits to how it can be used in a contemporary art setting.
I thought that was fascinating because actually it's back to the thing I wanted to ask you, and Ada, of course, which is about audiences and responding to it. I actually haven't found this a kind of depressing session at all. I find it actually rather exhilarating because I think it's not either or. It's all of the above. It's AI helping artists to create, much as Painters Workshop helped painters to do extraordinary things. I think AI will produce art. There's no doubt about that. And then us as audiences have got to work out the quality of it. But something you said earlier on, which I thought was really important, which was, you said, one, she doesn't understand. But also you said, artists is there to deal with the human condition. So my question or my thought is, can AI understand the human condition, given it's not human? It can understand data about the human condition, but in the end, there's still going to be a role for artists who are human to explore what great art does through music, through painting, through dance, or whatever, or theatre, the human condition.
Only that vast majority of data that AI uses is human. So therefore the outputs from that are going to feel human.
But it's the interpretation of that can only be human. AI can have its interpretation of something, yes, which may or may not resonate with an artist. But actually in the end, is there or is there not? I would argue there would be something about a human artist which is going to be different to what AI might produce, but actually might feel more tangible, more just more interesting to us.
I don't know. I think the imitation with the human is going to be so remarkable that it actually doesn't matter whether it's conceived human or not, because the imitation is so close. And I think that's a significant point. Alan Turing wrote a remarkable paper in 1951 about intelligent machines. And there was one line in there which Ada went to the Venice Biennale, there was one line in Turing's paper that said, actually imitating a human is like the unpleasant aroma of an artificial flower. Why would you want aroma from an artificial flower when you can have a real flower.
Yeah.
And I think that philosophically and ethically is a very interesting point, is we've gone to great lengths. We've done this as a way of mirroring back to ourselves. But actually, in that mirroring back, we've realised we are having enormous energies on aspects that make us seem like human. Why are we not looking after humans? Do you see what I mean? Because actually, if we did sometimes as much industry in the artificial reality versus the real, and we particularly think that in the biotech world, we're seeing that there's some incredible, especially with synthetic biology, where they're able to use data in remarkable ways to change all sorts of aspects, and that blurring between technology and people is very real. And I just think, wow, there's so much industry to be able to imitate. And yet we've got actually each other. So it's quite an interesting...
I think that analogy is really interesting, that you can have something which is industrially produced, but actually I'd rather like to know where what I'm eating has come from, and the sourcing of it, and the kind of, and the natural state of it, as it were, as opposed to something which is produced in a different way. Fascinating. Thank you very much.
I do want to be clear that Ada is very confusing. On some level, it is a deception because you think she looks like a human. She isn't a human, she's a machine. We're fully aware of that as a project. We're not trying to pretend anything here. We are really trying to do it as a mirror and say, look, this is confusing because in the world it's confusing, and she's trying to mirror that confusion.
Really stimulating. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I guess my final question to you, Mr. Meller, would be, you said at the start that one of the reasons for commencing this project and creating Ada was to provoke. You know, this was an act of provocation. And I just wondered, you know, I mean, do you feel that the reaction that you are getting to this provocation is in line with what you expected, or not really?
I think my last point, the one that I've come to try and summarise all of these different complex areas, is to try and say that creativity is not restricted to subjective, internal, conscious brain processes. Creativity can very much be done very well, thank you, by AI in lots of remarkable ways, and it can be studied and mimicked, and that is a game changer in the fact that it can study and mimic human processes super well. It is a tearing away of realizing that actually creativity is not subjective, internal, conscious brain processes, and suddenly realizing something that we've had so fundamental to our own identity. We're now going into a world where that is now clearly demonstrated as not being that. I think it's no longer just human, and AI machine learning is going to be very capable at language, at image creation, at music creation. We are going into a world where those processes are going to be mimicked extraordinarily well. And so to just trying to navigate this new realization about where we are with creativity. We use Professor Margaret Bowden's definition for creativity, which is new, surprising, and of value. So the algorithms that many algorithms that Ada is uniquely being developed for her, are new, they're specific to Ada, they're surprising, we don't know what she's going to do. We are looking over the shoulder to see the artwork that she does. And of value, well, in light of even the first exhibition she ever did, which was at Oxford University, was in over 900 publications, just that first exhibition. So for a new artist, that was pretty breathtaking. So, and then when we went, of course, to show the work at the Pavilion in Venice, the response was just so great. So I think people are realizing that we are going into a world of non-human creativity. That is a reality that we're facing now. And it really is for us all to engage with that. But I think your point, Lord Foster, about it's actually all of those things. It's going to be enhancing artists and helping them. It's going to replace some artists. as well.
Well, thank you again for being here and for bringing Ada. And as I said, you know, I know this was a massive operation in terms of getting her here, and we're very grateful to you for that and for your time and for helping us grapple with the challenges and opportunities of technology in terms of creative industries. And our inquiry continues. And today, your session and the one that we've had earlier this afternoon have been a big contribution to that. We're very grateful to you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The proceeding has ended.